Jerry Springer has passed away. What was he, almost 80 years old or thereabouts?
I don't have his age. I'll pull it up.
Well, pull it up or pull it down or tug on it a little bit. Don't tug too hard. He was a senior citizen. It might come off. But Jerry Springer,
79.
70, almost 80. I was right there. Is this just a United States thing, or does everybody around the world, our international audience, do they understand Jerry Springer, who he was, what he did?
Well, again, he was in syndication. I actually don't know too much about the international syndication on a show like that. I mean, there's a lot of talking, but I'm
trying to figure out how much prefacing we need to do instead of just saying Jerry Springer, like just Cher or whatever, Elton John.
I think even if you're a kid, let's say you're 20 years old, whenever you would have first been exposed to Jerry Springer, it wasn't necessarily the same show it was in the late 90s. So you probably do need to preface it a little bit.
Okay, well, basically, folks around the world or young people who are ignorant to everything that went on before you were born, Jerry Springer was at one time the mayor of Cincinnati, Ohio, in a previous lifetime. And actually, if I'm remembering correctly, because Cincinnati's right up the road, if I'm remembering correctly, it was either while he was mayor or then he was a member of the city council or whatever, but he got in a scandal and got kind of bounced from his spot because he had paid for a hooker with a check. And they found out about it. So that didn't show a lot of good judgment. But anyway, then for our purposes, Jerry Springer became one of the hosts of one of the early afternoon, daytime alleged talk shows that was more, people's problems and issues, trash TV, as it became known. I guess maybe what Morton Downey Jr. was really the trailblazer, and he was hot for 2 years or so. And then Jerry Springer came in with a more reasonable, kind of toned down version, and he was a little bit more charming as a host. And then as the program started airing and started expanding, much like the wrestling business over a period of about 50 years, only this happened in less than 10, the Springer Show started getting more outlandish and more worked and more over the top as entertainment rather than, I get entertainment for some. Did I do a halfway decent job there, Brian? What can you add to that?
Jerry Springer's first show was just a regular kind of talk show in an era when a lot of people from Maury Povich to Geraldo Rivera, let alone to Sally Jesse, Raphael, and Oprah, there are a lot of these kind of shows. He was one of them. It was a syndicated show. And eventually, I presume, I don't know too much about the history. I remember the Gigi Allen episode. That was early on. But eventually they realized the violence would sell. When I say violence, it wasn't like crazy violence, but it was just attacks, pulling hair, just craziness on the show. The chaos is what made the show stand out from the rest. Again, a different audience maybe you're going after than an Oprah or a Sally Jesse, but that's what it started as one of those shows, and then it just became a wrestling version of a talk show.
But there you go. Perfect summation. And at first, when they started doing this, you could kind of buy it. As we'll talk about in a minute, the wrestling community knew that it was starting to be or was a work or more of a work before the general population did. But you could kind of buy it because the theory was they were finding this basically the lowest common denominators of human society. Your homeless bums, trailer park trash, individuals that would, then the producers would sit them down and they had some conflict. He's pregnant by, or she's pregnant by him or the other guy or this or whatever the fuck. And the producers would wind these people with an issue up and let them loose out there. They're on TV with the audience, either screaming, booing, cheering, jeering, whatever. And they would get worked up and they would argue with each other and yell and have fights. Well, you stole my man, or he took my job, or whatever the fuck. It was the television daytime talk show equivalent of garbage wrestling, right? It just chaos where even no matter how sad you were to be watching this fucking program in the middle of your day, you could look at the people on it and say, at least I'm not as bad off as they are. These fucking trashy, slutty, sleazy, crooked, slimy individuals, right?
And then later on, we find out that they're either actors or amateurs wanting to be actors or just pro wrestlers.
Yes. And because then it was like, and we'll talk about the Wrestling Connection in a minute. And I'm not going to cuss Jerry Springer because he was probably a pleasant man that had no idea that he was responsible for the ruination of the wrestling business. But it started getting, they had to top themselves. And it started getting so outlandish and so far out that, like I said, at least at first, you know, you would see these people on there where you could kind of buy the story they were telling. And I mean, this shit was on every time. It was on when there were only 4 stations in the whole market, right? It was on one of the strong ones in the middle of the day. You checked in a hotel, you turned the TV, this shit, you couldn't get away from Jerry Springer. But there would be some believable halfway story in these trashy people to get in a fight or whatever. But as it started going farther out, and more complicated, kind of like a lesson of the wrestling business, then the people would start, you would see them go blank when they were trying to remember their fucking, you know, their backstory of their conflict with the other person. And then we started seeing actual people from the periphery of the wrestling business show up. And you mentioned our old friend Harry White. How did he turn up? How did that even happen?
He got hooked up, I believe, through what was the company he was involved with? Southern Illinois Championship Wrestling?
Yes.
Outside of St. Louis promotion or in St. Louis promotion.
And Herb Simmons and those guys, yes.
Well, Harry ends up on the show in a wig, and he's supposed to be in love with this older woman. Now, Harry looked like he was 85 years old when he was like 50. So Harry had white hair, and now he had a white wig covering his bald spot, and he's supposed to be in love with this older woman named Honey. And then this other bad actor comes out. He's also in love with Honey. So Harry and this guy are debating, and Harry gets up and he goes, I've done everything for you, Honey. I've even gotten this wig. And he throws the wig on the ground and he goes to kick it. And his shoe came off his foot and went flying into the crowd. And then you see this woman jump up in the crowd with the shoe and start like, yeah, I got the shoe. I got the shoe. It's the stupidest thing ever. And it was incredible. So Harry was on there. Then we started seeing like various people. Like you said, Jamie Dundee was on there. Weren't you supposed to be on there?
Well, hold on. Jamie Dundee became a talent booker for him for a while because he could find all these people that were either indie wrestling people that would get in a fight or argue, or even probably the most valuable contact they had for finding fucking tattooed meth heads from a trailer park. But anyway, at one point, yes, 1995, when the Gangstas were in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Out of the blue, I get a call, and this was again before the show had gone completely off the rails and all the wrestling people that we recognized were on it. But still, you know, I knew what the thing was. But they called out of the blue and wanted, because they had heard about this black tag team in this southern, Tennessee territory, saying all these, maybe they read one of the newsletters saying all these inflammatory things, and they wanted the Gangstas and their opposition, which at the time was Bob Armstrong, because he was commissioner, and we were leading up to the Bluegrass Brawl that year, and a big show in Johnson City where the main event of the Bluegrass Brawl was going to be Undertaker, Tracy Smothers, and Bullet Bob, right, against the Gangstas. And so anyway, they wanted us on the show, and they weren't even pitching the idea that we should expose the wrestling business. And it has been 30 years ago, but I'm pretty sure I made that clear at the start. But obviously what they wanted to do was they wanted to get us out there where, okay, the Gangstas are going to say some shit, and then you guys say some shit or whatever, and to kind of lead us or tell us or whatever. Well, I wasn't going to do that. But what we were going to do was between me, New Jack, and Bob Armstrong alone, we could have a pretty entertaining goddamn argument. And we were going to do exactly what the gimmick was on television, where Bob was the commissioner. He was not going to come off that fucking story. Bob was the commissioner trying to restore some order in the company. The gangsters had forced their way in and were attacking everybody and claiming discrimination if they were chastened or punished in any way. And I had been most recently had just switched babyface and managed the Rock and Roll Express against them, and had just brought the Heavenly Bodies back to fight them when they fucking busted me open and blah, blah, blah. And we were just going to do promos against each other and see what the lay of the land was when we got there and what happened. But we weren't going to do anything smart, and we weren't going to, I think they wanted to get Tracy with the Confederate flag and try to make him out to be, some kind of Nazi or whatever, but no. Because Bob was going to say that same thing he was saying on television to New Jack. It's not that I dislike you because you're black. I dislike you because you're an asshole. And do the whole thing. I didn't want to be on the goddamn Jerry Springer show. They shot it in Chicago, and I definitely didn't want to go to Chicago 2 days after a big show in Johnson City when I had post-production to do. But at this point in time, the Jerry Springer show in Knoxville, I was on the weakest of the 4 stations in the market, and the Jerry Springer show was on every fucking afternoon on the strongest one. I wanted people to see this, and we were starting to sell VHS tapes of the Smoky Mountain TVs. So wherever we could get some goddamn publicity, exposure, make people believe this angle was real, whatever the case, I'll do it, right? So we told them we'd come. And then in Pikeville on Friday night and Johnson City on Saturday night, The Undertaker was there, and Percy, Paul Bearer, was there. And New Jack told Undertaker that we were all going Monday to Chicago to be on the Jerry Springer show. And Taker called Vince, and Vince ended up calling me. And he did another one of those Vulcan mind meld things where he talks you out of doing something that you were going to do, and by the time he finishes, you don't have any idea why you thought you wanted to do that to begin with. But in this case, I knew that I'd rather keep Vince happy. He was not wanting me to be on the program because I was at the time still on his television and managing some of his guys, and he didn't know what the fuck that Jerry Springer might have us do, which is so ironic, as we'll get to in a minute, considering 2 years later, whether Vince knew it or not, Jerry Springer was the inspiration for everything happening on his fucking television program. Unfortunately. But anyways, so I said, all right, Vince has just sent me The Undertaker, and I get talent from him that translates into actual dollars, whereas the exposure from this might have translated into dollars, but not for sure, so I'll make Vince happy. And I called him on Sunday and said, well, we ain't coming. Ah! And I don't know what they did instead.
It's interesting to think. I mean, I never thought about it in the sense that it would have been you and the Gangsters and Bob Armstrong on a bigger station in Knoxville. How much exposure that would have meant. Would you have done anything different? Would you have bought an ad or anything during that show?
I mean, I know they've got final edit, but you can imagine that the city of Knoxville would have been mentioned so many times on that fucking program, they could almost not have edited around it. And or Smoky Mountain Wrestling trademark. And or, whatever the case, right? And we would have had footage of them hitting me over the head with a goddamn nightstick. And see, that's why they wanted it, because this was 1995. Rodney King and O.J. Simpson and the L.A. riots and all that stuff had just happened in the previous, 2-year period. And so they were going to do something, the wrestling version of that, but that's what we were trying to do. So we were just going to do the fucking same promos we were doing on our show for a different audience and see what happened. But we didn't. But then do you have Shit Stain's tweet? Because sometimes when I say this, people think that I'm being derogatory for dipshit and that I'm just knocking him and that I'm exaggerating or it's hyperbole or just my colorful way of speaking when I say he and his fucking idiot friend used to sit and watch hour after hour of Jerry Springer, and that inspired them to write the wrestling program, which is why that 25 years later, we're in the shit position we're all in right now, thanks to that. Do you have the tweet so people will quit accusing me of lying about this guy?
I have a tweet here, April 27th, 11:27 a.m. from Vince Russo. Man, I must acknowledge this. Make no bones about it, all in caps. The Jerry Springer Show was 100% the inspiration behind the WWE Attitude Era. Fast Eddie Ferrara and myself would sit there and watch episode after episode of Springer as we wrote next week's show. Jerry, R.I.P. and thank you, in caps.
Well, there you go. And that's the absolute truth, because it was a television show aimed and geared at the lowest common denominator of the American public, and imagine how low that is, with so that they could feel good about themselves by seeing people even trashier and stupider and more fucked up and more on drugs and more whatever their fucking issue was than the viewer sitting there at home. And it was literally, what do they call it? Cotton candy for the fucking brain, and that you just sit there and just stuff it in your fucking face and it kills your brain cells. And that's what inspired him to write the wrestling program, which is because he was writing for the lowest common denominator of people because he was a member of the lowest common denominator of people. He wasn't watching Jerry Springer for the ghastness of it. Like, look at this for 10 fucking minutes. Can you believe that people watch this? He was watching it on purpose and liked it.
He was the audience.
He was the audience. And that was who was in charge of the wrestling program unfortunately, for about 2 years unobstructed. And we've yet to recover from this point in time yet from that. But that was his mindset and his mentality, and that's why nothing made any sense. And that's why it was just constantly everything thrown out there at the wall.
You know, similar to wrestling, but different results. The Springer Show, once they started getting results from all this stuff, from their version of Crash TV, they went further and further and further with it. Their business exploded, became a very popular show. But then eventually wasn't there a crackdown? Like the city of Chicago was like, look, you're filming this here. You can't just have assaults on your stage while people are clapping.
Well, remember the security guy, the head of security, he got his own show as a spinoff.
Yeah, that's right.
Because at first they just let him fight, and you could tell the difference when they started early on, because people were just pulling their hair out and hurting each other and slapping each other in the face, and they didn't know how to work. And then they got the wrestling people in there, and it looked a little bit safer, the fights, to the trained eye. But then they got so many complaints, and, just it was so far that they banned the fighting, and they had the security to keep them apart, and the security guy was branched off onto his own show. But then the bottom fell out of the whole thing, because how much more of this could you take? And then it wasn't the hot thing anymore, because it was hot-shotted and then burnt out, and people went on to the next thing. And now Dr. Phil is sitting there, and everybody's got a goddamn issue they cry about instead of throwing furniture and fighting. But
that day Maury Povich discovered a paternity test.
There you go.
Changed television forever.
And then they were on to the next thing. And it was who's the father, Maury? And that was a lesson to, unfortunately, that anybody with half a mind knew to begin with, but that it took Shitstain and his fat flunky Ferrara killing the business to find out, you do all this shit for a little while and people just get sick of it and you can't do anything more because there's nothing left, and then it just floats away and is over there in the corner. And that's what happened to the wrestling business, because he tried to make it the Jerry Springer show, because the fucking moron has an IQ of a fucking demented rabbit and the attention span of a flea and no concept of what the future, how the future would be impacted by what he was doing at the fucking time. And he was let loose for a year and a half by a fucking megalomaniacal millionaire that was losing a fight for the first time in his life and didn't know how to handle it. And we got Jerry Springer.
So rest in peace, Jerry Springer.
So rest in peace, Jerry. As a matter of fact, where's your goddamn grave?
What?
He might just have to stand in for old shit stain for the next 10 years or so, depending on how long he lasts. I might have to go pollinate, urinate, and fornicate on old Jerry's grave a little bit.
All
for
right.
heaven's sake.
Well, to each their own. Yes. Not a good time to be named Jerry. They're dropping like flies. Hope Jerry Mathers is all right.
Well, he's the beaver.
He's the last one standing.
You think he's standing up?
All
or
right.
you think he could be sitting down? He could be laying down. I wish Helix was a sponsor. I'll tell you this, though. You think about beavers, you think about hairiness. Because every beaver is hairy, right? And especially in the 70s. But most beavers you see, the four-legged kind, they got hair on them. And it's getting spring. You know what spring is? That's the season before summer. You know what happens in summertime?
Beaver hunting.
Well, things get hot and sweaty. Especially beavers. And if you expect to hunt and find and catch and capture any of those beavers, gentlemen out there, you need to make sure that you are groomed sufficiently, because you know what happens when it gets hot? In the summertime, you get sweaty, the sun's out all the time. Imagine a compost pile sitting in the hot sun, watching every pretty panties. Anyway, no, I'm sorry, I'm doing Jethro Tull now. Sitting in the hot sun, there's a compost pile. And everything in that thing is just going to start to stink, and then it's going to start to sprout. Do you want mushrooms growing underneath your balls, Brian Last?
Certainly not.
Well, nobody else does either. Except if you're a vegetarian, and then that's up to you. But this year, it's going to be a hot summer, so you need to plan ahead, and our friends at Manscaped have you covered, or actually uncovered, as the case may be. No longer will you have fungal growth underneath your coin purse, because the Performance Package 4.0 is the ultimate bundle that you need to make sure that your bundle don't stink, smell, drip, or potentially sprout. And the star of the show is the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, the best personal grooming apparatus on the planet with the LED light. It's waterproof. It's got the skin-safe technology, which reduces the nicks, the snags, the tugs, the cuts, the slices, the minces, the dices, and all the other things that can happen down there when the shit gets wrinkly. And the Performance Package 4.0 now also includes the brand new Weed Whacker 2.0 ear and nose hair trimmer. You need different kinds of trimmers for different kinds of hairs. Now, you got the curly cues down south, you need the lawnmower, but you can't stick that lawnmower up your nostril or in the ear hole of your nearest ear. That needs a special shape. Now, don't stick this thing too far in, or you could give yourself a frontal lobotomy. And everybody knows that you'd rather have a bottle in front of you than a frontal lobotomy. Well, that doesn't work.
What?
It would only be me. A bottle in front of me instead of a prefrontal lobotomy. That's what you'd rather. But you can't have a bottle in front of you, or it'd be a prefrontal lobotomy. Yeah. So don't do that.
Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that.
And after clearing your nose, because now you'll be able to smell how bad your fucking crotch stinks. Once you clear all the hair out of your nose, well, then odors are just going to be more prevalent. That's why they got the Crop Preserver, which is an anti-chafing ball deodorant and moisturizer. Not only will they be deodorized, which means they will take the odor that they have and they will it out of there, but also they'll be moist. And they got the Crop Reviver, which is a spray-on toner for your balls. What tone are they now? Skin colored? Well, who knows what tone they'll be after you spray the crop reviver on them. And also, it'll keep these things from sticking to your leg in a certain kind of weather. When the dew point is over 65 degrees and the humidity is over 75%, you can leave some of the skin from your coin purse on the sides of the insides of your thighs there, and that's painful. Then you got to have that stuff grafted. Anyway, and their brand new Beard Hedger Pro Kit is just a wonderful thing. Also, if you've got a beard, or if you are currently serving as a beard for some Hollywood celebrity, the Beard Hedger Pro Kit contains 9 plus. 9 plus, it says. That means more than 9, possibly even 10. 9 plus products and wet goods. And if to get your goods wet, you're going to have to make sure they're clean.
Well, hold on. So, they're saying 9 plus, but they're not saying 10.
Well, it's more than 9.
But then what is it?
Well, it could even be 11. I don't, maybe it just order it and see what happens. And the start of spring also marks the start of Testicular Cancer Awareness Month in April. I should have got my new action figure ball colored. God damn it.
Ball colored?
But Manscaped has partnered with the Testicular Cancer Society to bring awareness to testicular cancer. Why do we want to bring awareness to testicular cancer? I think we should make the testicular cancer as stupid as we possibly can instead of bringing awareness to it. But they're also in favor of men's health and early cancer detection. So they got that going. Anyway, folks, if you want to clean yourself up and make yourself presentable, then all you got to do is go to manscaped.com and you're going to get 20% off and free shipping with the code DRIVE, D-R-I-V-E. Go to manscaped.com, 20% off and free shipping with the code DRIVE. For the Performance Package 4.0, which is we've raved about for years. I love the lawnmower and all the stuff that they've got. And you will too, because it'll get rid of all the crap that you've got. And plus, it makes it look bigger if you cut the hair down. Manscaped.com, code DRIVE.